So you're all for life extensions of humans, right? That could equally be disastrous in a way for the ecosystem.
So ultimately, I think that by the end of this century, there won't be more people, even if we're living the double the age. Once this becomes a kind of integrated tech where you just press one button and you say, look, can you help me out? That's gonna fundamentally shift the balance in digital exclusion.
So AI gets so good that basically they've taken the job prompt engineer before it actually became a job.
Everything that's happening in the world today is not the result of a conspiracy. It's simply a convergence of cycles.
Hey, buddy, how's life?
Hey, Patrick. It's good to be back at a new innovation newsletter.
Exactly.
Poof, I forgot a word there.
Just past Eastern, and looking forward to go to the past 2 weeks again with you, buddy, and see what happened and what you made of all that.
Oh man, we were just going over. Of course, we actually it might not always seem that way, but we actually prepared this, and we were going.
At least we tried to prepare it, right? Yeah.
We tried to prepare it.
But as always, new topics flying in the last minute. So yeah, that's just how it is. Yeah. Yeah, so I had an interesting couple of days. I went to a couple of events and also had a keynote for SAP. Let's start with the SAP keynote. It was interesting. It was a keynote for a group of board members. And we had a conversation about AI in the boardroom. And there were a couple of interesting things that I took away from that. So the number one reason that everybody seems to agree upon why they were hesitant in going fast is data. Data. Everybody was, I'm not sure that my data is good. How do I make my data secure? There was one gentleman from Nationale Nederlanden, a Dutch insurance company, who had a great story about how they dealt with a governance structure. And they were just all ears because he had one single source of data. So that was interesting to take away. And then SAP, of course, as being a German company, was talking about, hey, we have a sovereign cloud. So if you are worried about storing data somewhere in the US, it's safe with us. And that was also quite a hum run. So you see that they have pivoted their narration on being a sovereign cloud and are utilizing that in the turmoil of everything that's happening. That was to be expected, but seeing it playing out at a table and seeing that conversation, it's pretty evident that people don't want to store their data anymore in the US.
Yeah. There's well, we can't go too deep into the politics because we could cover that for hours. But yeah, there's definitely a shift taking place in a lot of this stuff. Yeah. I actually just quickly tying into that, I saw a LinkedIn post this week about municipalities and counties in Europe, and on the map it showed which municipalities and counties in Europe had their own basically local IT infrastructure, or had a European supplier, or they were with Microsoft. And it was funny because the map shows that the Netherlands, of all the Western European countries, is the only country where the vast majority of our municipalities actually use Microsoft Cloud. Yeah. And it was being criticized because this guy said, well, apparently the rest of Europe can do without this. And I find it so funny because he presented it like the quality of service that you get everywhere else in Europe is the same as in the Netherlands. And people in the Netherlands, and I want to stress it, they have no idea how good we have it. So I'm not saying that there's not a really strong incentive now to transfer to more local suppliers, European suppliers, to go back to a situation where our data is more secure in Europe. I'm not saying that isn't true, but I do want to emphasize that the reason that the Netherlands, we have a great system. I know Dutch people like to complain, but everything here is really well done. And even the IT at our governmental organizations and the municipalities, even though it seems ancient, it's still light years ahead of the rest of Europe. You don't want to speak to my friends in Italy or in Spain or even in Belgium when it comes to this kind of stuff, because everything takes longer there because they're basically still on IT infrastructure that's like 2 decades old. Yeah. And so I just want to say that it's oversimplifying to say like, the rest of Europe can do that.
Interesting point. There recently was another story about happiness in all countries. And again, Netherlands was on the 4th place or something like. Finland was number 1 and Netherlands was on the number 4. So things are pretty well arranged here. That's definitely true.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, and about the other event, I went to the Agent Force World Tour of Salesforce. For me, that was a little bit of a homecoming, of course, because I've worked there for many years. But it's interesting to see that a couple of years ago, this was all a customer relationship management platform. And it's completely rebranded now to a digital labor platform, really talking about agents as if they are employees. And that shift pretty quickly happened over the course of the past 2 years. Strong strategy, strong way of delivering that, but not so much customers yet So I made a post about it this morning on LinkedIn, and wondering why not many Dutch organizations are using more agents or daring to do that with a trusted company like Salesforce. But it was interesting. I configured a couple of agents there on the spot myself. You can talk to them, you can configure them, and they were quite similar as the ones that we have seen already from Microsoft or from Google. Yeah, it was an interesting event.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of jealous because I think that what I've seen so far from Agentforce is impressive. But to just make the quick link back to the previous topic, Salesforce is an American company.
Yep, true.
So,
Yeah,
so there we go again, right? And yeah, I think that we need to. The world is changing, but it's not as simple as okay, we're just going to switch to European alternatives because the
it's not so
European
easy.
alternatives are not. It's not so easy. They're not always there. They don't always have the quality. And yeah, so at the end of the day, it's a good thing, right? Because now Europe has an incentive to start working on that, and that will create economic incentive. Because if more money is available here, the market opens up for European suppliers. Then we can see a lot of progress going really rapidly. But it's not so simple.
And what's the reason why you want to move to a European data center, right? Because with Signal, we've learned that in some kind of situations, the US government can still access the data if you want, right? So it also depends on for what reason do you want to move away from something.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's another question, because what do you think, Patrick? Do you think that the European Union doesn't try to get access to the data?
Absolutely. And what do you think is if Signal is getting traction and these guys can sell it for a lot of millions or billions, that they won't sell it? So there are so many different angles in play.
Yeah.
I
mean, just like 6 months ago, I know people don't like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, but there's no reason to believe that when they said that the European Union tried to get them to open up their platforms and was even willing to pay for it, that's a lie. Why would they be lying around it? At the very least, we should accept that if there is smoke, there might be a fire, and to assume that the European Union has only our best interests at heart and will never try to create backdoors in our data would also be foolhardy, right? So we need to take everything with a little bit of a grain of salt. But yeah.
Hey, and there's another thing that a news article that I found very interesting in the past weeks. I think it was already 2 weeks old. The dire wolf was extinct and is brought back to manipulating some DNA, and there are now 3 living in some kind of ecosystem that they monitor very carefully. This is Jurassic Park in action?
It is Jurassic Park in action, yeah. I have so many mixed feelings about this. I can't even begin to tell you.
Well, first I always love to hear your mixed feelings. But yeah, if I tell the story, everybody is referring to Jurassic Park and then saying, well, that was a very bad idea, in that movie. But this is one of the things that we are now able to do, understanding with AI how the proteins are folded, how DNA is working, and we can do the gene editing. So we see it in action.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things that my mind instantly sprang to, and it might seem a little discombobulated. Is that actually a word? Discombobulated? No, that's probably not a good word for this one. But anyway, I was playing a game called, it's a cyberpunk dystopian kind of a noir thriller thing. And it's called Nobody Wants to Die. And in it, at the start of the game, there's a murder you're investigating. And when you come in, somebody says, he's hanging from the last cherry tree. And this is a common theme in specifically cyberpunk, dystopian, future kind of movies, etc. Is that, in Blade Runner as well, right? I think there's even like, is this real wood? You got real wood? So on the one end, technology like this is incredible because it opens up a door to bring back extinct species, right? And one of our greatest fears, if you look at, the tropes in sci-fi, etc., is that we lose all of the biodiversity of Earth because we destroy all of it. So on that front, this is actually very cool. But then you have the Jurassic Park scenarios. And talking about dinosaurs coming back, and I don't know if you've seen the last few Jurassic Park movies. They're getting,
No. Point, you have to quit the Jurassic Park movies, right?
Yeah.
After 2, it was already done.
They're not getting better, I'll admit that. But in the last movie, of course, dinosaurs basically all came back, and they're inhabiting the Earth, and it's creating, wreaking havoc. And there was this study in Yellowstone Park where they returned wolves to Yellowstone Park. I don't know if you ever read that. Because there's also discussion in the Netherlands, right? Because everybody's complaining about the wolves, they're killing stuff. I even had this conversation with my mother. Obviously, I discuss everything with my mother. Everybody knows. But the thing is that people are complaining about it. But when they returned wolves to Yellowstone Park, the transformation in the park was something that nobody had expected because the wolves changed everything. The wolves basically made whole parts of nature flourish again and come back, because they changed the way rivers flowed, because they changed how the deer migrated, etc. So the point I want to make is that, and wolves are luckily a nice example here, because we're bringing back dire wolves potentially. The impact of such a thing in an ecosystem can be massive, even with one single species.
Exactly.
It's not as simple as, okay, we're just going to bring back, these whales have gone extinct, we're just going to bring them back, right? Because if we don't take other things into account, and that's the trouble, we can't take everything into account.
We cannot take it into account. No, you cannot. You cannot calculate that. That's intractable. Yeah. But for some species, we are the reason that they went extinct. That was equally bad as trying to bring them back and see what happens with them, right? So
yeah, but why did the species go extinct? Because there wasn't enough fish. So let's say, and this brings me back to another one. I saw there's actually a new doco coming out from the great Attenborough. This man, how old is he now? 98? Guys, this guy's immortal. This alone should tell you that if you just spend more time in nature, man, that's so good for you. But anyway, he said that we're already seeing that in many parts of the oceans, climate change is still happening, but we are seeing a rebound in the ocean, in the quality of the ocean, because we have reduced fishing in so many places. Of course, there's still a massive Chinese fleet that was now off the coast of Argentina, which was crazy. And the Argentinian army had to get rid of them. This is also a crazy story. But anyway, the ocean is rebounding. But if species went extinct and now we bring them back, but the ecosystem is not capable of dealing with it because, for example, there's not enough food, right? Or whatever, then bringing them back might not necessarily be a good thing, because it actually could exacerbate the problems. And this is the thing. This is why I have such mixed feelings. Yeah, the potential is incredible, but the potential for disaster is also incredible.
Right. We can go on this. Let me spit out a thought that I have, right? So you're all for life extensions of humans, right? That could equally be disastrous in a way for the ecosystem, because nature never had humans that had eternal life. So is that not the same as bringing something back that was extinct?
Well,
all these things that we're doing, we don't know the outcome of it, right?
Well, I think, technically the answer would be yes. But again, for one thing, the situation is different. We're seeing massive population aging across the globe. We're already seeing population decline in the countries that are furthest ahead. I actually wrote a big article about this. I haven't finished it yet, but it's going to be published soon. Japan is losing 700,000 people a year. South Korea is losing hundreds of thousands of people every year. And this is what's going to happen in Europe as well. I mean, I think 25% of the Dutch population is over 65 already, right? And that number is going to increase. So that's the first thing. If people can become older, then I'm operating under the assumption that they won't just become older, they will be healthier much longer, right? But that is offset by the fact that we're not having children anymore. Right, so that will not lead to what everybody thinks. Oh, we're going to get older population. No, for the first half century, probably it will not happen. And if what happens, what we've always seen happen, is that if civilization goes up, the level of technology goes up, and freedoms increase. If that continues to happen in most of the world, then all of these people will start having less children, right? So if AI becomes more relevant, and for example, Muslims start to de-radicalize in sub-Saharan countries, etc., and they start having less kids, which will happen if their wealth level goes up. It's unavoidable almost. Then they will slow down as well. So ultimately, I think that by the end of this century, there won't be more people, even if we're living double the age. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
And then secondly, if we see a decentralization of technology, right? We see solar power, we see battery power, we see different kind of grid formation, we see Starlink, all technologies. We're even going to talk about another one for AI, which leads to decentralization of technology. And that means that I foresee a future in which we will de-urbanize, because people don't want to live in cities. They're living there out of necessity. The air quality is less, it's busy, you can't get proper sleep. Lots of people would love to live somewhere else, but our infrastructure up until this point in 4 industrial revolutions has been centralized in the infrastructure, so they had to. But in the future, you won't have to. Therefore, we'll have way more space, and because we'll have more space, we'll be able to have a smaller carbon footprint. So there's that. And then finally, I think we're going to go to the moon. And then Mars.
And then Mars. Yeah, exactly.
And then we'll see the same happen as we saw in Europe with the expansion to Northern America. Maybe at some point we'll see a birth boom again. But by that time, those people will go to the new frontier, which will be the moon and will be Mars, etc. Yeah.
Right. Well, we're pretty far out. Getting back to, is it a good or not a good thing to bring the dire wolf back? Sure. I don't have any problems with that. And as a matter of fact, I think we will play with I wanted to say, creating a new biological life form. This is not the exact dire wolf. It's been manipulated to look like a dire wolf. Yeah. So in fact, we've created a completely new species based on some blueprints that we think of an old species. And these kind of things will happen more over and over. Getting the plastics out of the ocean. We also have created some new organisms that can consume the plastics in some kind of natural way, but it's an artificial created biological entity, and the impact of what it will have on the world remains to be seen, as will be AI.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you're making such a wonderful example of the good that can come of this, right? But at the same time, if you watch a movie like Gattaca, where we're living in a dystopian future where people are genetically modifying themselves, because the guys behind this are the same guys that were behind human cloning, 10 years ago. And there's a scientist involved, I think, with this project specifically, but I'm not 100% certain on that one, that actually got into real trouble on human cloning, and then he transitioned into doing this stuff, right?
That came from China, right, or what? That cloning story.
Yeah, I can't. I know. Yeah, there was also a Chinese scientist. Don't know if I'm talking about the same thing, because now I'm just making connections in my brain where there's a vague piece of information left there somewhere, but I'm not exactly on the details. So I just want to be clear on that. But yeah, look, I am 100% convinced, we're not going to be able to avoid that. There will be a point at which people will go to a doctor when they want to have a kid, and they'll say, well, look, I want this kid to have blue eyes, blonde hair, or maybe they'll want, slanted eyes and the darker skin color, because that is the majority of people in the world. All of this is perfectly possible. But we want him to have an IQ of at least 150, and then we'll give him a cyber implant to bring him to 250. I don't know. This is no longer the stuff of fiction and dreams.
No, you're absolutely right. So, okay, let's move on to what's the topic that we have next. I see you've written something down about Google Agent Space.
Google Agent Space, yeah. It's kind of funny that we put the direwolves in between, because it probably would have been a better match with the previous topic on Agent Force by Salesforce.
Yeah,
look, we're in the age of agents, and of course you and me have been saying this at the end of last year, and we predicted it at the start of this year, and now we're really squat in the middle of it. So Google Agent Space, basically Google launched a platform, and I'm still kind of trying to wrap my head around it. But a few cool things about it is that they basically created a space where you can create AI agents that are particularly tailored and created for your company. So you can create data silos, and you can even integrate AIs from third parties. So you're not limited to Google's Gemini. You can bring in Meta, Llama models, probably even from companies like ServiceNow, Salesforce, etc. And you can tie them into your workspace or workplace and your data and your databases. And what they're saying is that they're doing it safe. Very important. They introduce an agent-to-agent protocol for interoperability. And it's kind of funny, because I seem to remember that Claude, Anthropic, also introduced an agent-to-agent protocol recently.
Yeah. So we discussed about that a couple of newsletters ago, indeed.
Yeah. So the interesting thing there is that, of course, we need that, right? But when the internet was on the rise at the end of the 90s, we basically, because all of it was happening open source, this is important to realize, because that's not what's happening now. And this might have far-reaching consequences. But because everything of that was open source, basically the whole internet in its foundational infrastructure is built on open source technology. So we have standards that everybody uses today. Just think about something like HTML, right? Just an example. Yeah. And now we're seeing this. Now we're seeing that companies are rushing to be the ones to present those new foundational protocols, etc., that will be the foundational infrastructure for this paradigm shift into AI as a layer between us and technology. And on the one hand, it's super cool that Microsoft is introducing it, and Anthropic, but it would be best if we just can have one, and then that is something that is open source again. That's what we would like.
Yeah, and I'm not so super technical, but I can understand in the past that certain protocols were necessary because we needed to agree on a certain language that we kind of transfer data in. But with the transform model and the fact that we can now transform anything to any language, can these agents not talk to easily pick up whatever protocol they need in order to communicate with each other? It doesn't have to be one protocol, and is there one company that needs that? And what's the benefit of the one from that Google is now releasing compared to the one we discussed? That I just don't have the questions. I'm just spitting out some hard questions towards you. I don't know if you know anything about it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me just make a short correction because I said HTML, but HTML is a language, and although it's free to use, it's not
probably.
actually. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So just a little correction there. Yeah. Coming back to what you said. Yeah.
That's something we don't know the answer to, but maybe we can discover it.
Yeah, we'll have to discover it. Coming back to I'm sure we'll discover it and discuss it again in the future. But coming back to the Google Agent Space, a few cool things about it. Basically, you get your own space where you can build your own custom AIs. You can tie AIs together, agents from third parties and Microsoft, Google as well, themselves. They promise that it will have enterprise-grade security and compliance. So there's that. Anything else? No, yeah, it has a no-code agent designer. So it brings, all in all, it ties together a lot of really cool stuff. And I think that will, again, accelerate the integration of agents in a lot of organizations. Yeah. And I think that's, in that sense, that's a good thing because there's so much potential there.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this kind of flows into the next topic. Google is quite on a roll with everything that they're releasing. The 2.5 model was, of course, very, very strong. But you also pointed me a couple of days ago to the Google AI Studio Stream functionality. Yes. It is just amazing. I remember when OpenAI was releasing 4.0, that was somewhere June 2024. We, by the way, watched that during a watch party from the Innovation Network meetup. And there we saw one of the engineers sitting down and doing some kind of video. He was just making a drawing on a paper and the app was watching with him. And we were waiting for the functionality to be released. And it's still not as easy to use that. You can now use your camera with OpenAI, but Stream, you can actually allow Gemini to watch what you are doing as you work, so you really have like an intern or an expert next to you that can answer any questions. So that is just amazing functionality, and it also has an API. So if that works with the agents, then well, you can already dream of quite cool scenarios that AI can help you do anything.
Yeah. So if Google AI Studio is basically available for everybody, as far as I know. I mean, it's open, it's free, you can go there. So when you go to aistudio.google.com, here at the top you have the chat, and in the chat you can try out all the models. And of course, here's Gemini 2.5 Pro preview, so you can find information about it, etc. And here you have all the different family models, and you can do some settings here. But what you want to do for this one is you want to go to Stream, right? So that's where it is. It is Gemini 2.0 Flash that's running it. Talk to Gemini live. And so basically you can share your screen, for example, or just talk to it. Can you hear me, Gemini?
Yes, I can hear you.
Did you hear that, Patrick?
Yeah, comes through perfect.
I did not hear Patrick speak. Would you like me to listen for that?
No, that's okay. Can you what are we looking at here?
From what I can see in the video, it looks like you are using Riverside, a recording studio platform, and you're in the Google AI Studio section. You and Patrick are both visible on the screen, and it appears you are recording a podcast or some kind of video conversation. Is there anything else you'd like me to look at?
Can you explain to me how I would change my audio input device if I wanted to?
Okay. Looking at the interface, you should be able to change your audio input device by going to the Cam Link 4K dropdown in the right-hand People panel. Does that help?
Well, I can't press it right now. It's grayed out. Do you know why?
One possible reason why the Cam Link 4K dropdown is grayed out is that the device might not be properly connected or recognized by the system. Have you checked if the Cam Link 4K is correctly plugged in and that the necessary drivers are installed?
Okay, so I'm going to stop it here. But I mean, obviously, actually, it wasn't giving me the right answer. But Gemini 2.0 is not as great yet, but I've also had it really help me out. And maybe if we continued on, it would have figured out that we're in a call. And so because we're in a call, I can't switch the audio device right now. But it can be super, super helpful. I really think that this gives us a great indication of where things are headed. And this ties in because, of course, Microsoft also in Edge released Copilot, which basically is the same functionality. But on a Microsoft AI model running in your browser that can look along with you and help you with that. And I've showed videos of this in my keynote over the last months, but it's already here now and it's becoming accessible for everybody.
Just imagine how many people are making screenshots of videos of what they're doing, putting it in a different AI tab, asking for the question, putting it back, and all that becomes seamless. That is just a fantastic use case.
Yeah, but beyond that, like my mom, right? She wants to use technology. She's 79. Can be hard for her. Now, basically, when when we need to get a little further. Right now, it's still she needs to go to Open or Google AI Studio, etc. But once this becomes a kind of integrated tech where you just press one button and you say, "Look, can you help me out?" That's gonna fundamentally shift the balance in digital exclusion that's going on in the world. A lot of people are not aware of this, but there is a lot of digital exclusion. There are a lot of people that are not digitally savvy and accessible. And you might say, well, but will they have access to these AI models? Well, maybe there's a little bridge to our.
Oh, but I think you're pointing out something super critical. A lot of people are assuming that the distance between people using AI and people who are not using AI is going to grow. It's going to be very unequal. And there are some facts to that as well. But AI assistants actually going to help to bring it all also more together. And so now my mother has to call me to do any assistance with their iPhone or text form or all these kind of things. When you can trust your AI assistant to do that, she will be basically having the same possibilities, and it's only limited to imagination. And even with that, AI can help. So I'm very positive about that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Of course, there's the adage now, and everybody keeps repeating it. Oh, AI won't replace you, but somebody using AI will. And that thing is going to die, just like the idea that prompt engineers was going to be a new profession, right? Because this shows that no, AI is getting better and better at understanding us, asking the right questions, helping us out, being emphatic, but it's also getting more and more access to what we're doing, being able to see what we see, feel what we feel at some point, maybe even not yet. But so the point is that it's not about being good at using AI. Look, that is still my recommendation. I recommend everybody to use AI, because in the next 2 to 5 years, if you do, you will probably have a little bit of a head start, right? And you can benefit from that. But ultimately, beyond the 5-year horizon, when this intelligence is integrated everywhere, it doesn't matter anymore what your skill level is, because it will be so simple and intuitive that anybody can do it.
You're saying something interesting about the prompt engineer as well. There was a window where I was thinking, indeed, prompt engineering, that's got to be a key skill, right? Till the moment that you put a prompt in, for instance, in Midjourney, and then you could read the AI-generated prompts based on your prompt, and then you would go like, how did it get to that? That's exactly the prompt that I wanted to write, more with way more details. So AI gets so good that basically they've taken the job prompt engineer before it actually became a job.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because even this morning, and I'm not going to mention any names, but even this morning I saw an influencer, I think it's a Gen Z or a Gen A, are posting like, oh, I made a custom GPT that can help you build the best prompt. Hey,
don't shame him or her. Don't do it.
No, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I have to keep my friend. No. But we're already beyond that. People just don't know it yet.
Hey, talking about... go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to make a little bridge because... Talking about intelligence being integrated everywhere. I told you something at the start of the show that you didn't know yet, so I was very proud of myself. Do you remember what it is?
No, maybe I don't, but I don't know why you talked about many stuff.
I put you on the spot. I thought you would do this super cool 1-2 switch. No,
it's going to be a rocky bridge.
The 1.58-bit paradigm shift of AI. I just want to quickly.
Yeah. Right. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm going to stick it in here because we're talking about intelligence being integrated everywhere. And what's going to be one of the biggest trouble with the models thus far is size. For one, size, energy usage, a lot of those things. And a lot of that had to do with the size of the models after they're being trained. And then, for example, their memory requirements when you're running them. Why can I not really run an AI model, or not really a top-level AI model, on my PC here, and I have a beast of a machine? Because I simply don't have enough virtual memory or a video memory, VRAM in this case. So Microsoft just did something and nobody's talking about it, and it's so massive. They introduced a new architecture for large language models, and I don't know everything about it yet, so I don't know if it will also be usable for the new reasoning models, but I think it will be. I definitely think it will be, because basically it changes models from running on either 32-bit or 16-bit to 1.58-bit, which is a little bit of a weird distinction or a naming. But basically what it means is that previously weights inside a model, and the weights are, it's a little hard to explain, but they represent like the synapses and neurons in the brain and how we process things. They could have a number, that was up to 65,000, I think. So there's 65,000 different options. But now they've made a model that can only have basically 3 right? So -1, 0, and 1. So it's a ternary system. Do I'm saying that correctly? Ternary system. Yeah. Now, you can forget everything I just told you. All you need to know is that the result is that we can basically maintain the same level of quality, a little less at this point, but soon we'll catch up, I'm pretty sure. But models are significantly smaller. They cost significantly less energy to run, and they require significantly less memory to be used. So to give you an idea, these models can run up to 32 times less energy. So 32 orders of
32
magnitude
times less energy. Yeah.
Yeah, less energy, or even more. Oh, wait, 41 times less energy. Apologies. They run 41 times less energy and 4 times faster. So much faster, which is also super relevant for us. And because they need less memory, you can run them on much smaller devices and chips with much less computational power. So this is a massive paradigm shift.
Is this comparable to, in January, the world was introduced to DeepSeek? They had a smarter algorithm that could do it with 10x faster, less energy, same results as OpenAI. This sounds like another such a leap from a smarter way of basically storing the algorithm in a tree way.
Yeah. So it's a different dial. So if you think of AI models with different dials that you can tune to optimize efficiency and performance, and this is a different dial than the one that DeepSeek improved, but it is of equal, if not bigger, impact, right? Yeah. Because this means that AI will be much sooner now. Like this is literally like we're jumping ahead years in terms of us being capable to turning a model like O3, which is an incredible model. We'll talk about that in a second, and making it so it can run on your smartphone, or making it so it can run on your home, on your laptop, right? And that means that we can run these models locally suddenly. We're not required to run them in the cloud anymore, which opens up so many possibilities because you can run them locally, so it will be safer. You won't have to be afraid that your data is getting hacked. You can still benefit from all of the benefits, and you can integrate intelligence literally anywhere, right? Yeah. And so again, we're making this exponential leap forward, right? Maybe not in the intelligence of the model. We're not going from 180 IQ to 15,000 IQ or something, but the fact that we now can bring this, we can basically within a year or two, you can bring 180 IQ AI robot and you can put it on a small little smartphone. You can take it anywhere, right? No, or in glasses.
And it's not like that the rise of intelligence is going slow, right? Because we both have slides in our decks talking about the average IQ, how it changes with every model. And we have a new update yet again, right? 2.5 from Gemini was the leading IQ model. But in the past 2 weeks, OpenAI released O3 and O4, and it has a staggering 136 IQ measurement in the Mensa IQ test. And with that, can solve problems that maybe 98% of the total human population cannot even solve.
Exactly. And I this 136, was that for O4 mini or was that for O3?
That's for O3.
Okay, so then it's important to mention this. The O3 that we got is actually not exactly the same as the O3 that scored the incredible 86%, I think it was, or at least over 85% on the ArcAGI, the last exam, because that model was allowed to think longer. And this is very relevant. Yeah. So it was a little fine-tuned, a little different, and was allowed to think longer. So if you're thinking, well, they're mentioning IQ and they said 180, now they suddenly say 136. Well, all of that really comes down to the amount of time we're giving the models to think in this case. And the reason that we get a model that gets to think less is because of how expensive it is to run O3. O4 is significantly cheaper. Really loads cheaper, like orders of magnitude cheaper. But this ties back to the previous topic of why it's so relevant if we can run smaller models that have smaller requirements, smaller compute, because that means they're cheaper, less and more energy efficient. That means that we can do way more with the current infrastructure. I'm not sure it will be good for NVIDIA stock and share price, because basically, the expectations for what we needed in compute to get to the same level will go down. On the other hand, Parkinson's law, and we'll discuss that as well, says that we're probably, or Jevons law, I think it's Jevons paradox for this particular one, would mean that if we're running this, we're just gonna move forward faster. So we still need the same kind of thing, but all of this is tied together.
Have you been playing with the models? Did you experience?
I was going to ask you the same thing.
Yeah. Well, I can answer that. I can see that it's taking a way longer time to think before it answers. So that really stands out. But the way that it is answering and the additional information that comes with it is impressive. And I was wondering, the things that I notice are things that are coming from the memory somewhere. I had a very simple thing. I was asking for simple plants in my garden, and it exactly knew about my garden, about my place where I live, and how the climate is. And all that came with the answer automatically. And I was like, holy shit, that is so much more information than I asked for. I never got that earlier. I don't know if that is in O3 or not, but that really blew me away, the details of that, of thinking ahead of what really was the answer that I was looking for.
Did you use it with a VPN? Or did you use it just normal?
No, I did not use it for the VPN at that point in time.
Okay, so for those of you listening or watching, another update has been made by OpenAI that now the models, at least officially only in the US, but the models can access your complete chat history. So they have a different type of memory now where they basically can access everything they ever discussed with you. It's not officially available in Europe, but through VPN you can activate it and use it. So I asked this because everything you just mentioned could have been a result of that memory. Right. But like you said, it isn't.
It isn't.
So it's actually mostly a result of O3's capability of reasoning through things.
Exactly.
And that is
the tiny things that it does know about me. Yeah. I also tried the GeoGuessr because online you see a lot of things that it's very good at GeoGuessing. I fed it some very difficult pictures. I didn't correctly guess the right place, but it did came with a set of conclusions. Oh, this must be in the Netherlands, probably this province, probably at this time of the year, which was all extremely accurate and very fascinating to see. It's just fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've had several really cool experiences, but I'll share this one. So I got this literally this morning. I got this ChatGPT, this WhatsApp message from my hairdresser. I'm not telling you who it is, but some people might know. He said, "Okay, ChatGPT is amazing. I told it about my mental state and some challenges I have, and its insights are just so incredible. This is better than most psychologists." And it's just super funny because that's been so he's using free, so I don't think that this is O3 yet, but this is the same experience that I had using O3 last week because I have some health things that I wanted to go to the doctor to figure out what was going on. But then O3 came out and I realized that when ChatGPT 4 was released, or GPT-4, it was incredible at diagnoses, but then very quickly that disappeared because they guardrailed it out. And recently, with everything that's going on in the US, I thought that maybe it's changed. Maybe I can try again. And to my, surprise slightly, O3 seems to have no guardrails. All it does, it says, this is not medical advice or this is not investment advice. And then it just tells you everything. And its diagnoses and its conversation with me around my challenges was just incredible. And ultimately, the diagnoses it came to is exactly the same thing that I got from my doctor after I went to the doctor and I discussed it with my doctor. And the research, so there have already been some surveys and papers, show actually that we're already at the point now. I think 6 months ago, we might have discussed this, where AI was doing really well, but then AI with doctors was doing better than the AI alone. Yeah. And then doctors alone were doing less good than the AI with the doctors, but better than the AI alone. But we've now passed that point.
Yeah.
AI's capability of coming to diagnosis, actually, when humans get involved, it just gets worse. And that's exactly what I'm experiencing with O3. So although it might not be great at math and at some, basic logic for humans, because it has access to this massive wealth of data, and because it has the capabilities of going online to do RAG, to kind of verify what it thinks on the knowledge that's on the internet, then suddenly it basically compensates so much for this lack of pure simple reasoning ability, and it can do these incredible things. And my experience has been nothing short of, I knew it was going to be good, but some of the stuff that it outputs, some of the things it says and it writes, it's just like, it really blows my brain.
Yeah. I also heard online, I read some stuff that it's not hallucinating as much as before, That's something I cannot confirm myself, but I just wanted to mention it, that multiple people have tested that and said that. So, which is also a good thing, right? So the trust goes a little bit up.
I don't think so.
You don't think so? No. Did you have some confabulation?
I think it's so there's this wonderful video actually exactly of Jeffrey Hinton, and actually that ties into something else I wanted to quickly share. So about my confabulations and my thoughts on hallucinations. So there is a wonderful video of Jeffrey Hinton, which is not here, but this is actually an article in the Economics, or actually it's a podcast, which I highly recommend anybody to listen to, and that's my tip. The Economist has really amazing articles on AI, and I've been reading them. They have an whole AI page, and the stuff that's on there is just highly recommended. A lot of really great articles. I'm going to skip to the first page for the most recent ones. Yeah, so here, AI models could help negotiate secure peace deals. There's lots of good news, also some skepticism, so don't worry. I highly recommend this. But there was this article with Jeffrey Hinton that I showed before, and there's also a podcast with him where he says AI hallucination is a bad word, because it doesn't hallucinate, it confabulates. Yeah. And the reason he says it does that is because it's far more human than we think. And that's also what the podcast with the Economist is about. And so what I think is that in humans, our ability to confabulate, our ability to imagine is a really important indication of our creativity and our capabilities and our empathy. But as humans, we know when we can and when we cannot do it. And then when we interact with each other, we know that somebody might be, some people talking to me might maybe think, okay, well, Aragorn, he can be a little bit of an optimist, or he can be a little bit out there. Maybe I should take what he says with a grain of salt. And if you talk to somebody that you know well, and you know that they're always bragging, well, this guy's always bragging, so he probably doesn't have a Ferrari, he has a Porsche, whatever, right? And we tie this into our interactions without thinking, because we've been doing that for 200,000 years, human psychology. But then when we talk to an AI, we're like, oh, it's hallucinating. No, it's doing exactly the same as we, but because we're talking to a technology, we don't accept it in the same way. And so for me, whether a model hallucinates more or less, I don't think that is necessarily a bad thing. Yes, we need to find ways to ensure that it's not hallucinating when it really comes down to it, and we can depend on its answers. But the model's tendency to hallucinate, I think, is also indicative of its capabilities of real creative thought. Therefore, the fact that O4 hallucinates more than O3, I think, is actually potentially a good sign. We just need to find different ways of curbing that when we come to our final answer. And with O3, I also think that it does hallucinate quite a bit, but they just fine-tuned it and they found ways to limit that in its answers.
They probably have a different definition from the one that you just have been explained, right? If they state that, yeah.
So that's, So I tied a few things there together. But everybody...
If that is done, let's move to another topic. Because I thought that you wrote an excellent article as a response on Karol Cadwalder's, did I pronounce that correctly, I hope, recent TED Talk, which is called "This is what a digital coup looks like." And maybe you can tell a little bit what you wrote there. And I have a couple of questions that I just want to follow up upon with you and see where that leads, because you got me thinking in so many directions there with your article. If democracy is going to fall, you've mentioned it many times before, but before I'll go there, maybe you can take us through that a little bit.
Yeah. So first off, let me say again, like I do in the article, and the article is the first of two. There's another one following, but I have the most respect for Karol Cadwalder. I think that's how you pronounce it. She is an investigative journalist, and many of the signals that she has seen and that are the foundation for her talks. Also, she had a talk a few years ago, and that was really horrible experience for her, because basically I think they ended up suing her because she basically said that Facebook had done some things. Well, I highly recommend people to look into themselves. But she came back, right? And it speaks to her character, it speaks to her dedication and her professionalism that she does. However, unfortunately, I just can't go along with her conclusion. She says that what we're seeing is that we're seeing the creation of oligarchy, right? A tech autocracy is being created, and these people are trying to take over power, just like to create a future like in the dystopian movies, like in the Alien movies with, I think it's Fate Industries, and in the Blade Runner movies with Tyrell Corporation, and basically corporations become more powerful than the nations, and we are ultimately turned into slaves, and we have a techno-feudalism, right? That just I simplified it, but that's basically what you're saying. And they're doing that by controlling our data and our information. But her claim is, in its very fundamental foundation, is that they are working together. They are doing a coup.
Yeah.
And this is where I completely differ from her, because
it's a conspiracy group of people that is planning this and executing it to perfection.
Exactly. Yeah. That is conspiracy level thinking. And there's a few reasons why I just simply don't believe that. One, and this goes for most conspiracies in the world, to have a conspiracy on that level of such a magnitude requires hundreds of thousands of people to actively work together and to agree to kind of work towards the same goals and make sure that nobody can find out. And that, for anybody who's ever run a team of more than 3 people, knows that it's absolutely intractable. That is nigh impossible. I mean, even the CIA, even the KGBs of this world find it almost impossible to keep things really a secret. And they are smaller organizations, and they massively compartmentalize what is known, which is why they're also so very often at odds with their own organization and with other parts of governmental organizations. So the idea that it's a conspiracy among tech CEOs who have no background in intelligence agency work or lifetime, like Putin would be better capable, because he is a former KGB agent, right? He would be better capable of doing something like that than any of these CEOs would in their organizations with people that work there. I mean, yeah, that's my one reason. And then secondly, historically, we can see that there's all these other signals or framings, and that's where Carol Cadwallader completely ignores all of this. She kind of treats the whole thing as a compartmentalized thing. We're seeing that technology is becoming more important. We're seeing that these CEOs are in the vicinity of Trump, and so my conclusion is they're all working together to take power. But she's completely ignoring everything else that's going on in the world. And from the point of view, and I've mentioned this before, for books like Why Empires Fall from Heather and Rapley, The Dawn of Everything, there's these massive cycles in human history that we can identify and that we can then extrapolate. And simply put, everything that's happening in the world today is not the result of a conspiracy. It's simply a convergence of cycles and a convergence of crises. And that's my main point. And my final point, and you mentioned, you touched on this in regards to democracy and capitalism. For most people, it's completely unimaginable that democracy and capitalism could come to an end, because we've lived it our entire lives. Our parents have lived it their entire lives. It's been like that for a long time. But in Dutch we have a television quote. Dutch people will know it. Resultaten uit het verleden bieden geen garantie voor de toekomst. Results from the past are not a guarantee for the future. And so, although I, as a future historian, do look at the past to understand and extrapolate where we might be going, I also realize that just because something has been a certain way for the last few centuries, or even for 1,000 years, doesn't mean it's going to be like that forever. It just requires a force powerful enough to disrupt that. Yeah. And with any technological progress, because we had multiple AI winters, right? So in the 90s, AI progress was basically zero. I believe that we've seen the same in the political landscape. The progress in political development, the progress in development of systems of governance, and the progress in development of economic systems has basically flatlined throughout the industrial revolutions, because we were capable of finding growth and improvement in all kinds of other areas, and there was no real pressure to find new systems. So capitalism developed into neoliberalism that has basically been unchanged for the last 300-400 years in its essence. But now we're reaching a point where the pressures, the historical pressures, the technological pressure, and all of these are running into, they're growing, and we're running into obstacles that will require us to fundamentally reconsider the systems that we're living in. Yeah. And I believe, yeah, go on.
And go ahead. Maybe
well, that's my conclusion. My conclusion is that we're living in a time, and no matter how hard it is to imagine this, where these systems are coming to an end. Yeah. And they will basically break down, and we will have no other option to for the first time in hundreds of years, start to consider different options and further explore the spectrum. It's like an ecosystem that's grown beyond its natural capabilities, and now we need to migrate to different new areas, new worlds, new opportunities. But in this case, it's an intellectual space where we need to go that we haven't explored before.
I'm happy to hear that there's coming a part 2 to this, because this was a very pleasant read. It builds up, and then you end literally with the real challenge, what comes next. I was hoping, and that's also the questions that I have for you. So what does come next, right? Is capitalism really gonna fucking collapse completely and build something up? Or can we, with AI, morph to somewhat? And if so, what is the most important, what are smart decisions to go in a certain direction, right? I'm not sure if it's in your article, but I was reading more about this. You were really inspired me to read more about how was democracy done in the past, how did the Greeks do it, and etc. And the whole voting principles in democracy is a very interesting one. So maybe a democracy can still exist in a way where certain groups of people that want to vote for a certain topic that they know of, or they can delegate a vote, all these types of different variations of it might be interesting, helped with AI. And I'm just saying, spitting out smart things. I don't want to place anything in your head, but I'm really curious what your point of view there is, Aragorn.
Well, I have some ideas. Let me blow your brain. So, what did Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, all of them agreed on? They said that basically a real democracy is never a system in which you have elected officials, because elected officials ultimately always lead to a certain form of corruption, because you will get the most charismatic people, you will get the people that are wealthy enough to actually spend their time doing politics rather than something else. So ultimately you get a completely unhinged representation. You don't get a proper representation of society, and therefore it's not really a democracy. And America is a wonderful example, because this is exactly what's happened there. It's super bad. They have a two-party system, which basically means that the majority of people are never represented, and the people that are in the lead in these parties are also completely only there because of money. It's their ability to fundraise, their ability to bankroll, and then their ability to be charismatic. I mean, look at an egomaniac like Trump, and no matter what people believe about him, right? So the system is fundamentally flawed, but we had nothing better up until this point. But here we go. Let's go. What did we learn from, I think it was it MIT? Or it was an American university. We discussed this in a prior newsletter. Current AI models are already capable of cloning your personality 80 to 85%.
Yeah.
Fast forward, 2030. This is when I say all of this is going to happen. We'll have AI that can be 100% digital clone of you. It can represent all your values, everything you are, your personality perfectly. So now we introduce, instead of a modern democracy with elected officials, we say we do a voting system or a lottery.
Yeah.
Every year or every single function is taken by lottery. And Patrick Wille is chosen to become president of the Netherlands or the EU, whatever. But you don't want to do it. And you're a human. You don't have to, because we're just going to put your AI model on it.
Okay, let me ask a question. Why not use my AI model to vote rather than using my AI model to become a president?
Well, what would be the benefit of that?
The benefit of that is that AI can help to look at all the complexities, take my values and what's important to me as a person in consideration, and could do that for 10 billion people on the planet, reduce the complexity, make fast decisions in line with the values where we want to go, because now I cannot oversee it. I can completely oversee it, and I go for the populism, or I go to the fake news, etc. That's why everybody gets disrupted, and I have work to do. I don't have. I can make it another study of it.
But there's two things to that. One, it would not be completely random, and the whole idea of a lottery is that it is completely random. So even if you don't vote, but you have your AI model vote, and even if you can set that up so that AI models are not impressed by charisma, but they are only looking at the raw data, which, by the way, I still think is going to be completely different representation for most people than they think, right? Because most people think they know what they want, and they think they know what they're voting. But the truth is that most people have no idea what they're voting, and they often vote for something that's not really in their best interest at all. But let's say that we can get rid of all of that, but we maintain the voting system. Yeah? Then what is the benefit to that versus something that is completely random? If we really want a true democracy, then we should go for something that's completely random. If we don't do that, and we still have a voting system, then why don't we take it to a whole new level? Why don't we say we take all the data from everybody, which is what I believe is ultimately going to happen. This is also, by the way, what happens in...
Which is already happening a little bit, right?
Yeah, well, it happens in Ian M. Banks' The Culture series, and it's basically also, to some extent, maybe what we're moving towards in China, but ultimately in the whole world, I think we can get that. Is that we take all the data from everyone, and we don't have votes anymore, but we have an AI system that is aligned. Of course, we're not there yet, but that's aligned with our best interest, that takes all of this, and that basically translates that to decision-making in the best interest of everyone. this is what Ian M. Banks says the future will hold. This is what Elon Musk believes the future will hold. This is also what I believe the future would hold. But that future is like 30, 40 years away from us, I think.
Yeah.
So then we completely bypass that. But in the meantime, something I think, for one thing, I think that, and that's coming back to it, I don't exactly know what it's going to be. And maybe it's going to be something completely different every day.
It was just for a discussion. I had another question. I just want to pose the question because you're talking about... Oh, sorry.
I just want to finish my sentence, and that's that I just believe that we've been stuck in a rut, and there were many good reasons for it. But now we've reached not only a time when we are forced to consider different options, but we will also be in the unique position to do that because AI as a technology, because our current technological development allows us for also decentralized technology, right? Web3, all of that. That can also be very important to play in that. And we didn't have those before. So it opens up whole new venues to creating new systems for governance. Yeah. And that is what's so important for people to realize. Go on, sorry.
So we last week or a couple of weeks ago, we had a news article about AI raising 8 million for an investment body. Yep. AI is pretty good money collector. They can manipulate your thoughts. They have an IQ of 136 that we just saw. Is AI not potentially the most populistic thing that it can imitate even better than the populistic leaders that we currently have?
Yeah, of course it can be. I mean, and we would have no defense.
We have no defense. No, exactly. Because we discussed it a couple of weeks ago as well, that sometimes AIs are coming up with an answer and they kind of trick you into believing how they came there. So the trickery is already upon us. If that becomes even further, then we're just hopeless.
Yeah, no, sure. Look, there's no denying that. But yeah, we'll have to look. I am going to be an optimist. I'm going to say we'll be able to. But yeah, we have to actively work to find ways to mitigate the risk. In the literal words of Demis Hassabis's literal words, these technologies will bring incredible good, but we'll also have to mitigate the risks.
Yeah, exactly. Let's keep it at that. Is there anything more that you wanted to say about maybe a sneak preview where this second version is coming? Where will you take it?
So I have a LinkedIn newsletter called Man and Machine, and this newsletter is not regular like ours, not every 2 weeks. It's focused on really going in depth on topics. And that's where I post everything. And then in Dutch, I also write for BusinessWise, and I have my own expert blog page there. So I also write, like, I have another article. I don't know if we're still going to discuss it, but the Parkinson's paradox. This is a Dutch article, and that's published through BusinessWise.
Right. Yeah, well, that's a great statement, Aragorn. And there recently was another report about the massive underestimation of the AI labor force, right? Once again, people are slowly discovering that AI will replace way more jobs than we thought before. I believe it's a very recent report, but you had time to look at it. Maybe you can explain your findings a little bit.
So this is from last week. Americans for Responsible Innovation. New report. Economists underestimate AI's workforce disruption. And of course, this is something that you and me have been saying for a while now. And I really see that now finally this is starting to cycle through and people are starting to realize this and reports are coming out. So the full report, you can find it here. Go read it on ari.us. You can find it there. But basically what it says is that and they wrote it here, economists have been using frameworks to kind of assess what will be the impact on the job market. And we've said this before. They keep saying like, okay, in the past, new technologies would cost jobs, but that ultimately they would create more jobs. But what they've been completely ignoring, and we've been saying this so many times, is that AI is no technology like previous technologies. It's not a spinning a Jenny, right? A spinning Jenny or a weaving machine or a steam engine that can be used to specifically replace one type of work and then optimize that. Because of its flexibility, and we discussed this when we discussed, for example, Figure and their robots, the Figure 2 is now being rolled out, 100,000 this year. The first use case, it took them almost 6 months to train the robot. For the second use case, it took them a month to train the robot. And that is an exponential curve that's continuing. So they keep getting faster and faster. So for future jobs, the new jobs that become necessary will also be replaced by AI and robots. And therefore, there will be no replenishing of jobs in the job market. And that is basically what this report says simply. And that leads to then the other small thing. I wrote this blog, Parkinson's Law Paradox for BusinessWise, where I talk about a future where humans no longer need to work. What are we going to do? Because that's a worry, right? Because if we survive the fall of capitalism, if we manage to create a world where there's post-scarcity, what are we going to do? And a lot of people are worried we're going to be bored out of our heads or have no reason to live. Well, I say that the same thing will happen there as what we've seen in the past industrial revolutions happen to work. If we have more time available to do something, we'll just go and do more of it. So rather than do more work because we have more time to do more work, if we don't need to work anymore, we're going to do more fun stuff, more cool stuff, more passionate stuff. I'm going to spend more time on philosophy, and you as well. We're going to meditate more. We're going to, do all the cool stuff we do now, but without the pressure of having to develop a monetary value.
Is that picture that you're painting also something that has to sink in the same way that you are a little bit ahead of the curve with understanding that AI will take away jobs? Every time I speak to people are confusing the fact that they don't have any purposes, they don't have a job. So why is your purpose connected to your job, right? And
exactly.
I really don't understand that. My life has been so much enriched with things that I could never do. I always wanted to code an app. Now I can. I always wanted to do graphic design. Now I can. I wanted to make music. Now I can. So that is just super. And I was wondering, people then say, well, yeah, you're different. And most of the people don't have that. Am I living in a dream world thinking that everybody should be capable of connecting purpose to something else, right? 200 years ago, people also had some kind of purpose to get through the day, enjoy the day, without having a desk job somewhere in an office building next to a highway, right? Is that purpose?
I think there's so many things that tie into that. It's nature and nurture, and it's also circumstance. I mean, if we're lucky, let's face it, right? We're middle-aged men, we're white, sure. We live in the Netherlands. So, and I think both of us also came from families where we were inspired to have broad interests, right? And that's what brought us together as friends. And it's not true for everyone. That's also a fact, right? If you were born in a kind of, more poor or a lower level kind of family, and you've had to hustle your whole life, like this is in America, it's very much the case, right? If you have to take 3 jobs and you never had time for a hobby, then obviously you might be thinking to yourself, well, what the hell am I going to do? Because I don't even have any hobbies. But that's because circumstances created it like that. Imagine 100 years in the future where your parents and your parents' parents all had so much time to do whatever they wanted that they developed all these new hobbies. They found these new interests and new passions, and that's all you've ever known. Then this is going to be your normality. This is going to be your...
That's normal. Exactly. And the amount of hours that we used to work, like in the beginning of the industrial age, like 60, 70 hours, has been reduced to 50, 40. Some Scandinavian countries already have 30. And hopefully this is some kind of path that we go down to 30, 28, a little less, and build it up with more fun stuff to do. But it's a difficult path. That is, and ties in, of course, what we do with our governments and sharing in a rightful way, in a good way with everybody. That's the key thing.
Yeah. Again, from a historical perspective, I recently read this wonderful book, The Dawn of Everything, and highly recommend it. It's really such a great work and a new view on history. And in it, they also talk about how there's this misconception that in hunter-gatherer days, like we spent all day hunting mammoths. No, the average human being in that time, and we had cities and civilizations where hundreds of thousands of people even lived together, right? So that's another misconception, that cities only occurred when we started farming. But they spent, anywhere between 4 and 8 hours a week on food collection, etc. And the rest of the time, they did other stuff. That's why the Mayans, for example, and the Aztecs and these early civilizations had so much time to create pyramids, to build incredible pieces of art, right? Art that we so blown away. Like even the craftsmanship that they have in some places, we're like, how did they even do it? Right. It's because they had so much time, and all they had was passion. Why did they create pyramids that took 10 generations to build? Why? It wasn't because they get paid. It's because they were working on it because they thought it was important, right? So their purpose, their meaning was derived in a completely different way than we have today. And they didn't even need to see it completed because it was the journey that was important rather than the destination. Right. And that's something that we're going to return to in a really massive way, hopefully, and that you and me are going to experience. I can't wait. It's going to be great.
It's going to be fun. Hey, just to reiterate the importance of discussing these topics with each other and where does purpose come from, because change is going to happen quickly. Let me show you just 2 things, because I just opened that report you were talking about. The factory of the future will only have 2 employees, a man and a dog. The man will be there to feed the dog. The dog will be there to keep the man from touching the equipment. This is such an interesting quote. It's a funny way of saying, but it is already happening. Let me show you another picture that I just found. Look at these companies. Yeah. All these companies that you see here are companies that we quite often mention. Now look at the amount of employees that they have. The world of Google's, Microsoft, Amazon's with hundreds of thousands of employees has been reduced to companies that have, OpenAI now already have 5,000, but it's one of the biggest, right? But they started with 200-300 and now they have 600 million active users. So
and they're branching out so fast.
teams.
I mean, they're already building a social network now as well. So, I mean, it's not technically you could say that OpenAI has multiple companies. They do surveys, they do research into UBI, they do so many things. So,
but so many things can be done by so little people, and that is it's already happening. I just wanted to show you that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So let's wrap it up, buddy.
We need to wrap it up. 1 hour, 14 minutes. But it's a special Easter edition, right?
It's a special Easter,
Because we still celebrate Easter in the Netherlands. Yeah.
So, if you liked what we've discussed, please follow, subscribe, share it, tag other people along. If you're in business and you wanna do a dinner and you want us to come to your dinner and talk about these topics, we're happy to do that as well. And like they say in the Netherlands,
see you later.
We can do it the other way around as well.
Bridging the gap of exponential growth. Patrick and Aragorn share the truth. Join our community, let's innovate. With Innovation Network, create a brighter